100 feet underwater. No light, no sense of direction. A violent current rips him away from his team. Then, a terrifying sound cuts through the absolute silence. Hisses. His oxygen is leaking. The gauge keeps dropping. This isn't a nightmare. This actually happened. David wasn't a beginner. He was an experienced cave diver. He had logged hundreds of hours exploring the complex, dark underwater cave systems of North America. He knew the risks. But in this specific cave system, hidden deep in the state of Florida, training didn't matter. One single mistake turned his years of experience into a terrifying countdown to death. Earlier that morning, everything had gone perfectly. David pulled his truck into the gravel parking lot near the Florida dive site. The air was warm and humid. He unloaded his heavy technical gear, checked the gas for the dive boat, and meticulously calibrated his dive computers. The water off the coast was crystal clear. It was a beautiful day. One by one, the dive team dropped backward into the deep blue water. At 50 feet down, the ocean was alive with vibrant color, but as they descended deeper into the sinkhole, the environment began to change rapidly. At 80 feet, the bright Florida sunlight vanished completely. Ahead of them was the cave entrance, a black, intimidating wound in the ocean floor. The water temperature dropped sharply, sending a chill through his wetsuit. They entered the cave single file, following standard diving protocol. David stayed at the rear of the group, monitoring their progress. Without any warning, a powerful, freak underwater current surged through the narrow limestone tunnel. It slammed into him with the force of a freight train. His hand tore free from the bright yellow safety guideline. He was thrown violently backward, tumbling out of control into an unexplored side passage. Thick sand and silt exploded off the cave floor, creating an instant whiteout condition. Visibility dropped to absolute zero. When the water finally settled minutes later, David pulled out his heavy-duty flashlight and clicked it on. The beam cut through the muddy water, revealing only harsh, jagged rock walls. Dead ends everywhere. There was no yellow guideline. There were no teammates. At that exact moment, David didn't think about his family back home. He didn't think about his life on the surface. His entire world collapsed into one brutal, terrifying equation: the distance to the surface versus the air left in his tanks. Trying to find a way out, David forced his body through a narrow, unforgiving gap in the rocks. Suddenly, he felt a sharp tug. His primary air hose snagged on a razor-sharp limestone pillar. He pulled back gently, hoping to free it without causing damage. Then, the worst possible sound echoed in his ears. Hisses. A thick stream of bubbles rushed past his face. His lifeline was bleeding rapidly into the pitch-black darkness. Minutes of precious air became seconds. He watched his gauge drop faster and faster. Panic hit him hard. Every human instinct screamed at him to thrash around, to swim wildly, to breathe faster and fight his way out. But panic underwater is a guaranteed death sentence. David closed his eyes and forced his racing heart rate to slow down. In, out. He whispered into his regulator. Not today! He reached down to his calf and pulled out his tactical dive knife. Guided strictly by touch in the murky water, he desperately sawed at the thick nylon strap that was trapping his gear against the rock. His time was almost entirely gone. With one final, violent slash, the strap broke. He was free. But then, his dive computer began to scream. A loud, continuous alarm. Low air. He had no second chances left. David had to attempt a controlled emergency swimming ascent. If he went up too fast, nitrogen bubbles would expand in his blood and kill him before he reached the sun. If he went too slow, he would simply drown in the dark. He unbuckled his heavyweight belt. It vanished into the black abyss below. He kicked upward with everything he had left, slowly and continuously exhaling to protect his lungs. 90 feet, 70 feet, 50 feet. The pressure in his chest was agonizing. His vision began to narrow into a dark, blurry tunnel. Just as his gauge hit absolute zero, he broke the surface. There was no dramatic music, just the sound of violent, desperate gasps for air as he tore the mask from his face. The bright Florida sun blinded him. David was alive. The dive boat was idling nearby, and the crew was already throwing a rescue line to pull him in. He had stared directly into the deepest abyss, and he had survived. The ocean never forgives mistakes. But sometimes, the human will to survive is simply stronger than fear, pressure, and total darkness. If you were trapped 100 feet underwater, entirely alone, with your air leaking, What would you do first? Tell me in the comments. And make sure to subscribe to Human Limit for real, gripping stories that test the absolute limits of human survival.